Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the PlayZ Warm-Up Podcast. I am your host, co-founder and president of PlayZ, Carrie Shields, and I am super excited to have one of my coworkers and teammates here with me today for our introduction, Brenna Collins. Brenna, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be back.
Yes, very excited to have you. So for those who don't know who you are, could you give a bit of an introduction of yourself?
Sure. My name's Brenna Collins, like you mentioned. I'm on our community success team here at PlayZ. So I have a unique role here. I've been here for 3 years now on the PlayZ team, which is crazy, but I work closely with our destinations day to day as an account manager and really helping market and support them on the platform. And then also on the marketing and advertising side of PlayZ as well.
Awesome. Love it. Time flies when you're having fun, Brenna. So I know you have been super helpful in being involved with helping to grow this podcast over the course of the last few months. What are some big takeaways that you've had so far in the season?
Yeah, it's been super interesting to me. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just as someone on our team who works really day to day with our destination teams, it's been super cool for me to hear the other side of the platform and really listen to the personal stories of our event organizers on PlayZ and how they've grown their brands. I feel like a lot of passion projects have now turned into national professional leagues. So it's been super cool to kind of hear from day one to where different groups are now. So that kind of ties into last week's episode. We had Arian Herbert on from Mars, an adult kickball league. Super close to my heart. He was one of the first event organizers that I got to speak with a few years ago now, when I started at PlayZ. And his story has always really inspired me, just ever since we first chatted about how he wanted to make adult kickball more accessible and more of a legitimate national sport. And I think one of my big takeaways from his story is just the power of social media and growing a brand. I think Arian is incredible at using social media just on his own brand and for Mars as an organization. And it's just really clear now seeing that he has, ESPN coverage. I feel like he's always announcing different sponsorships with big name brands. So I think it's just the power of social media and using it to really tell your story in a way that kind of personally resonates with your audience. So big shout out to Arian at Mars there. Last week's episode was awesome.
That was very well said. I agree. I think it was cool to hear. I mentioned this in last week's episode, but I feel like we started around the same time in our introduction to sports tourism. His organization has only been around for a few years, and as well as our platform PlayZ. So being able to see him grow over the course of the past few years has been incredible. He's such a genuinely good guy and a family man, and so I love being able to see his success and just being able to share his story and getting to know him more. I'm super excited to see kind of what he has going on in 2025. So if you didn't get to listen or see that episode, definitely check that out. But today we're actually talking to two other niche sports. So ones that I think we were both introduced to just over the course of the last year or two. Obviously we're exposed to more sports than the normal person, but we have Evan Walters from World Axe Throwing League. He is the commissioner, and we also have the commissioner of the World Knife Throwing League. Brenna, you were able to listen in on this conversation. What were some of your takeaways from our conversation with the two of them?
Yeah, I think as someone brand new to axe throwing, knife throwing, just hearing anything about it, I learned a ton. But as someone who works with our destinations, I think it was really interesting to hear kind of what goes into running their events. But I think something that really resonated with me at the end of their episode was kind of their takeaways and lessons that they've learned from being in this industry. And I think it was Evan that said, community can really be made anywhere you go. I just loved that. And as long as you have a common interest that people want to gather around, I think he said that they started out with only 10 or 15 locations around the country, and now there's hundreds of different axe throwing, knife throwing locations. So I feel like as we've talked to different, more niche groups, it's really those unique organizations that have such a passionate following from all over the globe. I think they mentioned Folks have traveled in from New Zealand for their world events. So it's true that people are coming to really explore the area and connect with each other on a much deeper level, on a grand scale. So for me, just personally, that was super touching and inspiring to hear. But also, as the destinations come into play, it seems like a really unique and incredible opportunity to host such a large group like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think both Sarah and Evan ended on such a positive note in talking about the importance and their passion around the community of the sport. And I think both of us on this call agree with that. But I thought it was also super interesting, as you said. I mean, our platform was built for connection, and a lot of times that connection comes from RFPs that are put through our platform. So, for example, an organization like either of these looking to host a known event and looking for a new place to host that event, and they go through our 5-step RFP process. But I think what I've learned over the course of the last few months is the importance of fostering sports within your community, and that was something that both Evan and Sarah said. They aren't just looking for a host for their World Games or their national events, but they're also looking to build partnerships with venues and destinations that already have their leagues in their locations, but how could that partnership help grow the sport and community and partnerships within that community? And so I know that wasn't mentioned too much on air, so I just wanted to point that out. If you're interested in connecting with them, you know that you have an axe throwing location, or you're just looking to learn more, definitely reach out to Evan and Sarah. We'll link everything to this episode. But just wanted to give a quick summary on both of these organizations. So the World Axe Throwing League, WADL, is the global governing body for the sport of axe throwing. It was established to standardize the rules, regulations, and safety measures for axe throwing competitions and promote the sport worldwide. The WADL works to bring together axe throwing venues, enthusiasts, and competitors under a unified system, creating a structured and professional environment for the sport. The World Knife Throwing League, WKTL, is the global governing organization for competitive knife throwing. Much like its counterpart, WADL, the WKTL was founded to create a standardized set of rules and regulations for knife throwing competitions, promote the sport internationally, and foster a sense of community among knife throwing enthusiasts. Both leagues aim to make throwing sports more accessible, safe, and competitive, fostering a sense of community while promoting them as serious global sports. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a ton, and I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. Brenna, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Plazy Warm-Up. I am your host, Carrie Shields, and today I am so excited to have Sarah Said, Commissioner of the World Axe Throwing League, and Evan Walters, Commissioner of the World Knife Throwing League. Sarah and Evan, thank you guys so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Awesome. So to start, could you guys share the story of how, I'm going to say, WADL and WKTL was founded and what it's inspired its creation?
I'll start with us. So WADL was founded in 2017 by our founder, Mario Desilea. He owns a chain of axe throwing locations, and he noticed that the community wanted more participation, organized leagues, and he wanted to bring everyone together and create a really inclusive community that supports each other, teaches people how to do better as a thrower, and also kind of connect different owners around the country and the world and help them join together to provide resources for each other and just grow the community in general. And especially at that time, it was just coming to the United States, and we were opening up different facilities. I'm one of the founding members at my location here in Houston. And I found that it did exactly that for me at the very least. And that was overall just the goal, to get people together, to join the community together and help support each other.
Love it. Evan, how about you?
Yeah, so the World Knife Throwing League is essentially a sister organization to the World Axe Throwing League. I started off with the World Axe Throwing League and getting it kind of up and running and whatnot, and that was kind of my specialty, of getting that sport out there and helping it grow And so in about 2020 or so, we were kind of taking a look at what other things we could do to really enhance the community as well as the locations that we already had, and kind of leverage that into giving them something extra that they can do. And so we saw that there was kind of a void in the knife throwing department for a larger cohesive organization for that, and so we figured we would just jump into that realm as well. So we founded the World Knife Throwing League in 20 at the end of 2020 2021, and got that started up, and so now we're both working together to get both sports up and running.
Awesome. And I think one of my favorite parts of my job is just being exposed to the different types of competitions and sports that are out there. And I know axe throwing and knife throwing are both pretty foreign to me in terms of what is an event for each of these sports. So could you guys both explain what could someone expect from going to one of your events when it comes to competition?
Yeah, so we have different events of varying size that are hosted either by us or hosted by our affiliates, which are our location community members that run the leagues. So anywhere from like the small ones being like 20 to 50 throwers, all the way up to where we have the World Axe and Knife Throwing Championships. We have about 450 unique throwers across 5 disciplines, if you include knife throwing as well. So the events are pretty big for Worlds, especially. You can get about 1,000 people on site for the event itself per day, which is all the supporters and the staff and all of the competitors. But all of the lower tournaments are hosted by our affiliates all the way up until right before that, which is our nationals. And those host a couple of hundred throwers or more. And those are the biggest ones that the affiliate can host.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we have our affiliates as well. Some are in WATL, some are not, because they're 2 separate organizations. So we have just some knife throwing clubs and things like that as well. And anybody's open to hosting those. And we typically have bids to the World Championship attached to that type of thing. But it could be anywhere from a single day, just kind of an afternoon smaller tournament, to a like Sarah mentioned, World Championships that are going to be 4 days in a row of constant throwing bladed objects.
Love it. So I know I have an axe throwing location down the street that I had mentioned to you guys. And so I asked you, what does it take to host one of these events for a location? Is it any axe throwing, knife throwing location? Could it be hosted outside, inside? What are you guys looking for in a host?
Well, typically it's indoors more often than not. For the smaller tournaments that our affiliates and things like that would typically host, it is usually at their venue space. They already have targets built out and everything, so it makes things easy. For the larger events, sometimes we'll have to get big event spaces. Our last World Championship earlier this year was in a brand new hockey rink facility, and so we basically just covered the ice and had the entire thing set up with targets that we brought in. I think we had about 20 lanes or so about that, not to mention ESPN space as well. So
awesome. And it seems like the sport has a strong community vibe. How have you been able to foster that, and what has that meant to the growth of your sports?
I can speak to that since I've been part of the community as an owner before I was the commissioner and a thrower, of course. So we primarily bring the affiliates together. We have regular meetings. We have connections on Facebook groups for people to talk in. We also have different people who are just makers, and they make these beautiful custom axes and handles all the way through to trophies. And we connect them with the community as well. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop from like the ownership down to the actual thrower looking for different items. So just creating those spaces and those connections and opportunities for people to promote their events and what they have has really helped a lot. Back in the very beginning, it was as basic as learning how to throw. And it does for like new throwers as well. You can go to the venue and get a lesson, and that's where the majority of people start. But back then, like, there was only one location open at the beginning of 2017 in the whole country. So I had to learn, number one, how to be a better thrower myself and learn how to teach people how to be a better thrower. So there was a lot of YouTube videos, lots of like contacting Waddle and asking them for like instructionals and helpful stuff. And some of those videos are still up today because the throwing mechanics hasn't changed that much. So yeah, just anytime we're like, we need this in the community, either the community came together and created it or Waddle has helped create a space for that. The prime example for that is during quarantine when everything was closed down, one of the community members created the Quarantine Axe Throwing League, which they called Quaddle. And Waddle actually helped facilitate it and let us use their scoring system and a way to connect each other and the forum that we have on Facebook to get people together and signed up. They did the actual organizing of the event and the game matches and stuff like that, but we were very lucky that they had that for people to do because people could participate outside and they could still get their axe throwing in, and everyone was kind of going stir crazy. So they got that connection via Zoom and whatnot as well. And I got to know a lot of throwers that I never would have otherwise, including some of our throwers who come into Worlds and other tournaments from like as far away as New Zealand.
Wow. Awesome. And I can attest to those YouTube videos. I was doing some research before this conversation, and you guys have such great content available for your community in terms of beginners to intense. I didn't get past the beginners just from learning. But you also have a great social presence. I know, Evan, I've seen you in a few of your TikToks. Can you talk to the importance of having kind of one, that social presence, but two, like those viral moments to help grow that sport?
Oh, for sure. It's kind of my specialty has been social marketing and things like that, and it's invaluable. And that was one of the reasons that axe throwing kind of became as big as it was in the beginning. Is just once the kind of bars and axe throwing venues started opening up, people would post on Instagram, hashtag axe throwing, things like that, and it was essentially free advertising. But even still today, there's plenty of opportunity. People, it's still fun and exciting and everything, so we still get a decent bit of that and everything. But just being able to spread the word about yourself, you're not going to get anywhere if you can't tell people what you're doing. And so the easiest way to do that is obviously the internet. It's there. Everybody has it available. Algorithms being kind, hopefully, on different social platforms. If it helps. Every little bit helps. From the fun viral videos to even some of the more risque ones that are not. There are some that may or may not be ones that we wouldn't like to show because people may try to do something a little dangerous and whatnot. But typically, we try to work and make sure that people know that this is a fun and safe sport. But either way, people learn about axe throwing one way or the other, and knife throwing. So that's there's always no publicity is bad publicity.
Awesome, and I highly recommend. It was definitely my type of humor. Seeing some of your TikTok and Instagram videos, and it was cool just to be able to see the community that you guys have built. But you mentioned kind of the safety part of things, and I know a lot of what you do is making sure that locations and your events are properly insured. Could you talk a bit about that on both of your ends?
Yeah, I can start. So Waddle has a certified distributor, which is an axe throwing one of which is an axe throwing insurance place. And there are several actually in the community that people refer to if you're in different areas, because across the U.S. and the globe, you're not always going to have the same coverage from state to state. But we help connect the affiliates with people who are going to help give them the best rate, if not a discounted rate for being a member. And they create the insurance requirements based on whatever the companies need. And a lot of it has to do with the same insurance that you would have for like a bar or restaurant or active center. And it just depends on your rate is determined by the usage. But as a sport as a whole, there have been 0 axe-related incidents. And I personally, at least for my facility, attribute that to our coaches loving the sport and being very attentive with the people who are participating. And we don't let them horse around with the axes or do anything like that. The most common injury at my facility in particular is splinters because the coaches don't wear their gloves we provide for them. So, well, they should be wearing them, but not always. But that's like the biggest concern, and the most common thing is like people just touching the board, like wanting to touch it, and they end up with a splinter. So other than that, it's just like any other public space: slip, trips, and falls. They trip over their own feet, anything like that. But I've never had to really worry about anybody hurting themselves during the actual throwing process.
Awesome. Evan, how about on your end?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. And when you get into a venue, typically there are coaches that are there that help guide you to, learn how to throw properly. They'll make sure that you get all the fundamentals down and that you can do it in a safe way. But then they're also sticking around usually, or just within sight, just to make sure that everybody's still remaining safe and staying safe and things like that. And we again, from the very early beginning, another one of the reasons that we founded the leagues is to kind of standardize safety practices and things like that. And because everyone was just kind of doing their own thing, and so there would be some that might not be as safe as they could be. So we wanted to make sure that we maintained a good high level of safety as well. Just like with any sport, when fencing is about, they don't use actual blades for that kind of thing. Every sport has its own safety practices, and so like one of the things we did for knife throwing in particular is we were working on just ways to make sure that when knives are being thrown, that there was going to be no bounce back, or if a knife hits the board at the wrong angle, it could potentially go to the side. It's very rare that kind of stuff happens if they're throwing with proper technique, but we want to account for all situations. So it's typically a standard practice to have some sort of gate or fencing next to the target lanes, and as well as all of the knives that we have come with guards on them specifically, so they can't go through that fencing and things like that. So we're not only just trying to standardize safety practices, but also improve as well.
Yeah. Awesome. And I know axe and knife throwing are both not sports that you would see in gym class growing up, like you would a basketball or a soccer. So how are kids and our younger generation getting involved with the sport? And what is your organization doing to help grow the sport at that age?
So the number one thing that people tell us if they have been axe throwing previously was that they did it at the Boy Scouts or they did it at summer camp. They do hatchet throwing, sometimes knife throwing, but mostly just hatchet throwing at a lot of those areas. We've had Boys and Girl Scouts come in and participate. I had an entire 6th grade class come in one time.
Oh my God.
So it really is just getting those kinds of activities in front of them and creating that exposure and things that they can see. We do have, actually, because axe and knife throwing are non-gendered sports and they are also all ages, we have kids who are throwing who are like 8 to 10 years old competing with and kicking the butt of adults. So we also have an unofficial organization that's one of the charities. It's called SWATL. It's the Senior World Axe Throwing League. And so we do have people, including there's one family that throws where the grandfather is like 90 years old and he throws in league all the way through to the great grandchildren. And it is something because it's a lot less difficult than people think it's going to be. They think it's going to be heavier and you're throwing the really big fireman axes or something like that. It's only like 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds for like a hatchet. So we do a lot of that. We donate. I personally, in our facility, we donate to schools when they request it for like their fundraisers and things along those lines. But the parents usually come and do it, and then they ask us while they're there, hey, can my kids come throw? How old do they have to be to participate? And I end up telling them that. And then some venues even have discounts and family days every week. So like at my facility, you can get a kid to throw for free if you bring at least one adult. Or is it 50%? One of the two. But we try to encourage them to come. It's a lot more walking and physical activity than they think it is. And there's even like an unofficial junior world championships that are hosted every year at one of the facilities. But yeah, it's a family activity, to be honest.
It's another one of those things too where I've seen a lot of families kind of bring in their kids and stuff to kind of get them disconnected from, internet spaces and videos and things like that, and which is really nice. It's a tactile activity that people can do, and it's not something not necessarily everybody would think of first off, but usually, in the spirit of competition as well, people tend to get into it that way. Especially in like the knife throwing communities that I've seen, it's they've been thriving so much because it's just almost passed down from from parents to kids over generations. So
I thought that was a really interesting point that I hadn't thought of while researching the sports, where just the need to get away from screens and being able to have it as a family activity that you can all still compete at the same level, similar to going and playing darts at a bar. And I think that is similar, as you say, the precision sports, which is really interesting. And so I know you guys have a big conference coming up around precision sports. Could you talk to that, how that came about, and what we should look forward to at that conference?
we had gotten together with some other sports events organizers on a trip out to Buffalo earlier this year, and we got connected with a whole bunch of other sports organizations. And as we are, about a decade old almost for axe throwing and knife throwing, little younger than that, but still fairly new in terms of a sports league or organization. So this was kind of our first big foray into meeting a lot of other sports league organization runners, and we got connected with a whole bunch of them, and kind of swapping stories, talking about what works and what doesn't, collaborating a lot, which was fantastic. But one we really identified with well was the American Darters Association, and we started speaking with their vice president, Carl, and we pretty much realized that we are fairly similar in sports, almost uncannily. But we all throw sharp stuff and have a good time doing it in fun settings. So we thought it was just kind of a natural progression to why don't we do something bigger? Why don't we organize something with multiple sports? And so this is starting this year, we're going to be hosting what we're calling the Precision Sports Summit, which is going to be axes, knives, and darts starting out. And honestly, with the amount of precision sports that there are out there, we're hoping that we can grow it into something bigger.
Love it. And Sarah, were you going to comment on it as well?
I mean, Evan pretty much hit everything the nail on the head for it. We were both at the same event too. Honestly enough, it was our first one. I was very excited. So, but we actually just got off of a meeting with Carl and the ADA and other people about planning for the event next year. And we've done a teaser already. People have had a really great reaction to it. I actually found out through the community when I started talking to people about the event and they started asking us questions that there are a lot of dart throwers who are also axe and knife throwers that were in our community already, and we had no idea. There one gentleman in particular was very excited. He's been throwing darts for like 30 years, and so he's really excited for the event. And just trying to get everyone together and build upon that and get the communities together, because there are so many other sports that are hosted alongside of our events anyway in our local affiliate houses. Like I have dartboards up at my facility, and I know other places do cornhole leagues. There's a huge amount of people who like to go play disc golf in the community, which also I believe is a precision sport. Don't quote me on that one, but for sure, like there's different sports where there is a ton of crossover. Curling is another one. I curled in college and so have a lot of other throwers because those precision sports have things that cross over skill wise. And also we all like to drink and throw things. So
and be competitive. I think I've told you this, but I was a basketball player. Two of my co-founders played football on special teams, and we are one competitive, two still like to have fun and compete whenever we can. And so I think it's awesome to hear that it's really, I mean, someone as a washed-up athlete, how can I still compete? And it's in sports like these that still foster a community to get to know people, have fun, and still compete on a high level. And so I know another one of the big events that you guys have coming up are your World Championships. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, what to expect in 2025?
yeah, so it's going to be hosted at Appleton, Wisconsin. We actually announced this year that we have a 3-year deal with them for 25, 27, and 29. We did host with them twice before and had great experience with their staff in the venue and turnout and feedback from the throwers in the city. So we're going back there again, and we're taking up their whole conference center. And we have food trucks that come in. We have mobile targets, tattoo vendors, tons of vendors from the community, from everything from earrings to axe throwing themed soap, as well as like the custom axes we talked about before. And it's a really special event for everyone in the community because it's kind of like a family reunion. Like everyone is going to be there, and you may not have seen them, even if you went out into the community and participated at a tournament, that they'll be there at the event. And so it is just a great time for everyone kind of to get together. We're going to be hosting knife duels for the first time as well there, since that's a new discipline. And everyone's really excited for that. We are sending out either bids this afternoon or tomorrow, so people are going to be getting a lot of enthusiasm and excitement and buzz around it actually right now.
Awesome. And I know this is going to be a stupid question, but could you explain what you mentioned disciplines a few times? Could you explain what is a discipline and some examples of like someone like an amateur like me is not sure of?
Yeah, absolutely. So when the organization first started up, we just had axe throwing, and that was it. It was essentially just hatchets, really. Smaller axes, hand axes that you kind of throw like a dart. And as that went pretty well for the first year or two, but as the community started growing, they essentially were like, well, what else can we throw? Or how else can we throw, really?
Yeah.
And so we then implemented a what we call our disciplines, and they're essentially just different versions. So big axe is one of those. That is where you will throw a two-handed sized axe at a target. And then the other one that's very popular is called duels, and it is a little misleading in the name.
Okay.
'Cause you're not dueling with axes and knives. But you.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's exactly where my mind went.
It was a play on words because it is teams of two, so it is dual players who are competing against another team of two.
Okay.
So it gets some team play in there. That one's fairly exciting to watch, also because they have to throw at the same time, so they might collide axes or something, and it becomes a much more difficult, a higher difficulty game in terms of strategy because you have to be very connected with your partner. So that's very popular. And then for knife throwing, we started out with just a standard knife throwing game, and then again, people really liked doing team competition, so knife duels was introduced this year actually.
Awesome. And so
No big knife yet.
yeah, it's going to be my next question. So when Sarah, you mentioned that we should be expecting bids. What do you look for out of a host destination and a venue when bringing an event to their location?
Oh, I was talking about our player bids for World going out.
Oh, player bids. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I can talk about our regular
Yeah,
bids
that would
for
be
sure.
okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
But yeah, so we've been accepting bids for Precision Sports Summit for a few months now. So we're looking to finalize that over the holidays and get going with those cities or the city that we select. For Worlds, like I said, we have a host for next year, so we're looking for 2026. Our quick 3-minute kind of vision of it for explaining things is we need 30,000 square feet at least for Worlds, because we do have 10,000 of that square feet dedicated for ESPN. And then we need as few columns and pillars or sections out of the wall as possible, because we do throw towards the walls. We need about 1,000 linear square footage for the targets, which are 20 by 20 roughly, to set up against those walls, since it is much more difficult to build walls and then tear them back down again in the time frame that we do. We also look for 12-foot minimum for ceiling clearance. That's just the safe amount that the insurance and we as the industry have determined for the various size axes, including the big axes, to have clearance for any light fixtures or anything above the lanes. And as far as other items go, we are pretty flexible about where we're going to go. It just has to be at least at a maximum 30 minutes away from an airport that has at least 3 airlines that come into it. So we have a lot of opportunity to go to medium and smaller size cities if they're like closely located to different areas. Um, and mostly we found that the medium sized cities are the most excited to bring something different and new to their area. And we come and bring about a $500,000 spend to the city when we come. They're shelling out money, and this some for some people this is their big one of their big vacations for the year. So they'll stay and hang out in the city, or they'll come early and go to like a different city that's nearby. I know a ton of people who went to Green Bay last time we went to Appleton, and then Chicago's only a 3 hour drive from there. So some people went to Chicago. So, the sports tourism section of things is true, and it holds true for our people, especially. They want to make the most out of it. And I think New Zealand, last year, they made it into like a 3 week, month-long vacation. So they came to Worlds in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They went to Los Angeles. They went to Chicago. They went to New York. And I got to see them post all of this stuff on Facebook, which was really exciting for them as well. So our international throwers really take the tourism part of sport tourism very seriously.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are our basic requirements. Do you have any others I forgot, Evan?
Uh, no, those typically those are all that we really need. Unless it's our world championship, then we do typically need a bit more because we have ESPN involved. And so bringing in large video trucks, lighting setups, things like that, it does take a bit more space and a lot of power and things like that. But it typically, aside from that, though, it's pretty much the same general
Yeah.
requirements for everything else. So.
Yeah, I think the clearance for ceiling height's about 20 feet for the ESPN area. You reminded me the scaffolding can have an effect on that as well. So, but we've worked, like you said, we worked with space if we can make it work and find out how to configure stuff. It was really cool in Tulsa because they had stadium seating around the bowl. So we actually utilized that in the ESPN section there. So people were sitting on the other side of the glass and they were watching people throw. So we were able to take up much less of the space than we normally would to kind of because the seating was included for some of the people. So it was, we can be flexible, but yeah, we do have to have a little bit more firm to the 30 to 35,000 square feet for ESPN, for sure.
Awesome. And I know some people might have only been introduced to your sport through ESPN. Could you talk to that partnership and the impact that has had on both Waddle and WKTL?
Yeah,
that's all you, Evan.
Yeah. So I was one of the ones that got us together essentially in the early days. We really we kind of lucked out in a time where ESPN was looking for something fresh and new, and happened to get in contact with a producer over there, and essentially we've been doing at least one ESPN broadcast every year for the World Championship, sometimes multiple broadcasts, depending. And they love us because a lot of our broadcasts and things like that don't need to be seen day of. They like to call us evergreen content. So, if there's ever a time where they're like, you know what, not quite sure what to put here. Oh, but we got axe throwing. That's pretty cool. Why don't we put some axe throwing in there? And, in terms of their, scheduled times and stuff. So it's been, honestly, I've been out and about and seen, and, just at like a bar having dinner with my friends or something, and be like, oh, look, I'm on TV with ESPN, so they guarantee us some slots, obviously, for when we do our, like, some scheduled dates so people can tune in and see it if they weren't able to go. But after that, you might see ESPN any time of day, or you might see us on ESPN at any time of day. But it really helped having ESPN on in general, because it kind of helped legitimize us as a sport, more so than we have gotten any other time. We were kind of lucky to get in very early in our stages of life as an organization, and it's really helped expand and grow and make the community known to everybody. And that's really the biggest benefit of having that. Just like, with social media and things, it's getting it in front of people, letting them know that it exists so they can come and try it out. So that's our biggest bonus with ESPN, is that it gets the word out there that we exist.
It's great. I mean, you guys are truly entrepreneurs and innovators when it comes to really growing a sport, exactly like you said, that not a lot of people were well aware of 5, 6 years ago. And so, what other initiatives are you both working on to increase participation, global participation, and visibility for the sports?
For global participation, we just are trying to support the venues that we have that are in the different countries, try to work with them so they can host leagues and potentially tournaments and become active participants in the sport. This past Worlds, we had people from Japan and the UK and New Zealand come, and we are in several other countries. And just trying to encourage people and give them the resources at the affiliate level for them to uh, become active in the community and to grow their leagues and their business in general. We do a lot of active sponsorships with different brands. For example, we had a contract with PBR, and a lot of the local news segments and locations really liked that because, for one in particular, I remember they had a former champion put a can of PBR on like the target and then threw at it. So it was like this huge promotion for like everyone and everything for World. And first shot, he got it, if I remember correctly, too. So it was
He's
doing
the world
really great.
champion for
Yeah,
a reason.
Exactly. But yeah, I try to just get our presence out there on social media and get in front of new eyes. That's always the hardest thing for anyone, business or sports organization. Your customer acquisition costs are astronomical the more obscure you are. So that's why we put a lot of initiatives into like trending social media stuff and TikTok and getting people in front of audiences that are not used to it and haven't seen it. The majority of people who come to throw at my facility have never thrown before, or they didn't even know it was a thing still. So there's plenty of people out there who still don't know axe and knife throwing as an organized sport exists. And Evan, you can speak to like more of the media stuff and everything for sure.
Yeah, and in addition to all of that as well, overseas, even within the borders of North America, axe and knife throwing has not had an easy path into existing. I remember in the early days of the axe throwing league, I was constantly writing letters of essentially of like recommendation, things like that, to counties and towns and to essentially because there were businesses that wanted to open up, but they were afraid, that they didn't know that this was a legitimate thing and that there were safety standards and whatnot. And so I was writing, letters of recommendation. It was like, from the commissioner, they are going to sign up and be part of our safety program, this, that, and the other, to really just kind of convince people that it exists and that it's real. And that is still the case. And the laws vary from town to town across the world, honestly. And luckily in Canada and the U.S., it's not quite. It's grown accustomed to it and everything, and it's grown to a good area. Overseas, it is still harder to do, especially with language barriers. But I remember we had an affiliate in, I believe it was Denmark, and he had an axe throwing club and facility out there. But in order to have throwing axes, you had to register every single individual one with the government. And so he showed me his stack of like 80, pink slips essentially saying that he is a registered owner of these axes and, so on and so forth. Well, over here, it's just a tool, So every country, every town, every county, province, etc., has their own laws and regulations. So it is a hurdle. But again, it's passionate folks who, especially when they come to our larger events, they experience it for the first time and they get impassioned by the community that's there, and then they take it home. And that's one of the things I usually recommend to anybody from any league is to go to one of those larger tournaments at least once and just see how you feel about it. And typically, more often than not, they become so impassioned by it that they take it home and we make things work. So.
Awesome. And when you say leagues, I know we talked about the bigger events. Could you talk to where anyone could find those leagues happening?
Yeah, absolutely. WorldAxeThrowingLeague.com, WorldKnifeThrowingLeague.com. We have a member section there and a search bar essentially, as well as a map that pinpoints all the different locations around the world that there is an affiliated location. And all they really have to do is go, and there's even, you can search by your zip code, your state, your province, country, etc. But yeah, worldaxethrowingleague.com, worldknifethrowingleague.com. Definitely make sure to check those out if you're interested. And they, as well as having not just those locations, but all their contact information as well. So if you find a local axe house that is affiliated with WATL, it'll have their phone number, their email, their website, all that stuff. So you can go ahead and contact them and say, hey, I saw that you have an axe throwing league. What do we do to get started? And they'll bring you in and teach you how to do it.
Awesome. And so what has been the biggest lesson that you guys have learned over the course of the last few years being involved in the position you are? I know, sorry, it's a big one. Big one.
That's a good one.
You want to go first, Evan?
Sure. It's I would say that the biggest lesson I've learned so far is that honestly, I would say a community can be made essentially anywhere that you go. You know, as long as you all can focus on something fun and exciting and engaging in a sport, you know, particularly, the community just grows naturally. And it was really awesome to see, especially when I kind of think back to the early days of when we started WATL before WKTL, and how we had maybe 10 or 15 locations in the U.S. and now we have hundreds. You know, if it's fun and it's exciting, people will, you know, put aside everything, you know, tap axes, go out onto the field and throw and have a good time. And it's just really, really nice to see these connections. You know, even to the point where we've had people like propose at tournaments and things like that before. So,
Yeah,
That was great. I know I put you on the spot there, Evan.
that's okay.
That was awesome.
For me, the thing that I've kind of learned, especially in the past like few years, is similar. Like, there's been a lot of people who've kind of felt really lost in the past few years. You know, people aren't having as much community, they aren't going out as much. A lot of friendships kind of fell apart with like the distance that you kind of felt between things. And axe throwing community, and I found from talking with the other commissioners of the other sports, is that it's not just us, it's everybody who is feeling the same effects and are having, you know, different people who are unhappy with like whatever is going on in their personal life, and also like it bleeds into the sport too. But I've also found that people who feel that way, they will, you know, get support from their community, and then they go back to or go to a tournament for the first time, and they join the community and they become part of what we call the Axe family, right? People know each other, they support each other, and it's not just for sports related stuff and advice on throwing tips and everything. Like, we'll frequently see GoFundMe's for somebody who has like an illness who's a community member, or people will help raise funds and do raffles for facilities that are kind of having a little bit of a hard time right now. And the community is so willing and wants so badly to connect with each other and help uplift and support each other, that it, in my personal opinion, it overshadows any negatives that people focus on. So for me, that is the aspect of like being part of a large community and a family and actually supporting each other is probably the best part of the community. And I never expected that, because my history in sports has been very team oriented, right? Softball, volleyball, you have your team, you compete, and that's who you are. And then that's it, those 6, 10, 12 people, whatnot. The overall community is so much bigger with axe throwing, and I really appreciate that part of it as well.
You guys both crushed that. That was a perfect way to end this conversation. I know that that's really what motivates me in my position is just building a community of like-minded people who are passionate about what they do and growing their sport. And so this has been such a pleasure getting to know you guys, getting to know your sports. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. But thank you for being here. As I mentioned, we'll to get in touch with you, we will link everything to this episode. But Evan and Sarah, thank you again, and until next time. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for having
Bye.
us.